2012, and I've probably been doing them annually almost since then, with little short hiatus here and there. And so this one is all new. This is all new
Woohoo!
in terms of the presentation, yes. I realize how much work it is to make them. I haven't done them in a couple of years, so. And this is not medical advice, just letting you know. I think you and your doctor have a very special relationship that you should keep yourselves. And I don't want to interfere with that at all. So
You're a doctor.
please take this as an educational opportunity, because that's what it really is. This is a learning experience for me too. I feel like every time I do one of these, I learn something. That's why I like doing it, because it really challenges my own perception of what my beliefs are, and also gives me like insight that I don't really ever realize I'm going to have while I'm doing it. So that's kind of the special part for me. I don't know what the special part for you is, other than maybe being hungry if you haven't eaten yet.
Sorry.
And I'll give some personal background. I am Portuguese and French. Yes, that was really important for you to know.
Light up.
Whoa!
Just all
Fancy.
All right.
Getting.
Now it's Christmas.
We've
Yeah,
arrived.
I mean, I think like the reason for stating that is that's kind of how I learned about nutrition, right? Like my grandmother used to cook me maybe traditional Portuguese food, Mediterranean style cuisine. On my mother's side, and then my father's side is French, and
There's a lot of butter.
yeah, get a little bit of French cuisine, but not so. It's more Americanized, but that was my exposure. Not everyone grows up the same. Not everyone eats the same things, right? So we all have a different perception of food from childhood, maybe. What our people that took care of us gave us for food. And so, yeah, I think I ate pretty healthy as a kid when my grandparents fed me. But when it came to my personal choice, maybe not. But yeah, and I went to pharmacy school. I graduated in '08, and at that time I had nutritional requirements. I had to take a nutrition course where I learned that my granola wasn't that nutritious. That's the biggest thing I took away from that one. And also, when I was in pharmacy school, I remember every lecture for almost every pathophysiology class started with non-pharmacological interventions, which are non-drug interventions that could be used. Lifestyle modification, right? And diet was always there. I was like, okay, well, that seems pretty important. So that was kind of something that I noticed, and I also was taught that we needed evidence-based everything. We needed science to back it. So most of the nutrition I was exposed to was kind of the mainstream medicine science at the time. And then I came across CrossFit in 2007, and I thought these guys are weird because they don't have any science that I can use, right? I was very skeptical of the nutrition advice in CrossFit when I first came upon CrossFit. I wound up getting certified in CrossFit nutrition course where I met Rob Wolf and Matt Lalonde. It was still absolutely bizarre to me. I walked away and I said, I don't think I'm going to use any of this because I just had a lot of skepticism still. And then over time, I kept seeing all these videos of really fit people beating my workout times and realizing that they were doing the diet. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try it. And I eventually started to kind of cater more to CrossFit diet advice and started doing that. It's awesome. Okay, so eventually got certified in international sports, the International Society of Sports Nutrition, which was kind of a weird thing. The owner of my gym said, hey, I can get us a big discount on this certification if I get 5 people to do it. A bunch of coaches all joined in and we got certified. And that was a very interesting experience. I had to read a lot of textbooks and I'll probably never do it again, but it was very nice to see a different perspective on sport nutrition that I was exposed to. And then, yeah, I'm a lifelong learner. I have biases. My bias is that I like to eat whole foods. I really am an advocate of whole foods. I, especially meat, okay? And I do believe that chemical exposure can affect metabolism. That's a bias I have. So take that into consideration. I'm 5 years sober.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I really had a drinking problem, but when my wife got pregnant, I said, well, that's not fair that you can't drink and I can. And then I realized how much better I felt overall during the pregnancy. We both continued just doing that. And it's just kind of how that works. But and I do have some stuff out there in the interwebs if you want to see how my own perceptions of nutrition have changed over time. You can. The Grass-Fed Pharmacy was my first podcast with Snow and I. And then The Externist with Colby Cullen, who's a physician from California. We had a few episodes on if you want to check out some funny stuff. Yeah, and then, we're going to talk about nutrition. I typed in nutrition to the PubMed search engine. It was 88,000 pages. I have read every single study before coming here, and obviously that's a joke, right? And yeah, it's like what you know, and then the more you learn about something, and then you realize you don't really know, but people think you know. That's kind of how nutrition is. I think there's so many studies that come out, it's really hard to keep up. And I'm just going to go over the big picture with you. I feel like there's a lot of different people in here. And the objective is to learn everything you already knew and just remembered you weren't doing. Okay, a lot of this stuff is probably going to be like, oh, well, yeah, I knew that, right? But I think that reminder and seeing it, hopefully at the end of this journey of this workshop, you'll realize we're going to talk about it, okay? And you realize that approaching nutrition is oh shoot, did I skip that part? Yeah, I want to talk about this. Gosh, approaching nutrition is an N of 1. Okay, you're an individual. Everyone's different. Everyone has different goals, body types, genders. Okay, exercise habits, lifestyles. Right? So most of nutrition is this. At the end of the day, we can look at big studies with lots of people and things like that. But what really happens is you try something, you experiment on yourself, you get results of that experiment, you learn from it, you move on. Maybe you change things, maybe you don't, okay? That's kind of where that picture comes from. That's a really interesting paper on N-of-1 nutrition. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but hopefully you can see the big picture nutrition when it comes to training and sleep. You can see the historical aspects of nutrition throughout human history. We can get an appreciation of the physiological basis of nutrition, why we eat food in general. The state of science in nutrition, which I think is the funniest part for me. And then CrossFit and health, health versus sport. A lot of you participate in classes here. Probably want to get some practical application of this. Metabolic flexibility and hormone signaling, and drivers of disease, and how that interplays with my approach. And my practical approaches to health and performance that I use. I have nothing to hide. I'm not trying to sell you weird things. Okay, we have two pictures here. One's right here. Walk by it every day. You come to this gym. And it is the primary recovery hierarchy, okay? Training is absolutely incredibly important. Training, you can think of it as exercise, but it's also just environmental. What the environment places on you, the stressors of the environment. Some of them are self-chosen, some of them are maybe not self-chosen. And then you have sleep and relaxation, right? Sleep is incredibly important. We're going to talk about more of that. And then you have nutrition and then active recovery and so on, other things. Okay, nutrition is so small, but the nutrition is the foundation of the CrossFit pyramid of fitness. Okay, it lays the molecular foundation for fitness and health. But if you see the size in relation to all the other training, obviously training has a much greater size, area under the curve, square footage. So, we talk about nutrition, it's good to have like a kind of practical application. We have three different athletes. We have a strongman, we have a triathlete, we have a CrossFitter. All right, they all eat, let's say, 10,000 calories a day. Okay, this is not, this is common. This is common, 10,000 calories a day for a triathlete, strongman, elite level CrossFitter. What's different? The way they train. And they look different too. Okay? Bill Kazmaier, greatest. They banned him from strongman, he was so good. And then Lance Armstrong, back in '88, look at that. Wow. Young Lance.
No Tour de France pictures?
Yeah, well, I didn't want that. And then Rich Froning, on why you should do triathlon. Anyone know that joke? Okay. That photo was featured in a magazine that said why you should do triathlons. And he commented, he says, I'm the guy in the picture and I don't recommend that. Okay, so they all look different, right? Similar calories, different physiques. The training drives the physique adaptation, okay? The training stimulus has your body respond. The only thing nutrition is doing is giving the molecular foundation for those adaptations to take place, right? So sleep deprivation elevates cortisol, which is a hormone higher than normal, okay? Cortisol is stress hormone. That means you're stressed every day because your cortisol is there every day and it elevates every morning, right? Okay? It may reduce basal metabolic rate to have a higher than normal elevation of cortisol, just like cool things like that. But long-term stress can impact different things. It can increase cytokines. It can increase insulin resistance. It can lead to disease in and of itself outside of nutrition and training. Right? Just losing sleep can be an issue. All right. Circadian rhythm is just a fancy thing of night and day shifts that we see in our hormones. So when you're awake, you have cortisol. When you go to sleep, you have melatonin. And the things that impact that, light obviously when you wake up, light comes on. There's a bunch of pathways in your eyes that fire off and tell things to do things. And food can impact that whole paradigm, okay? If you eat at night. If you wake up every night at 2 o'clock in the morning and you eat food, your body has to digest it. There are chemical signals for everything that happens in your body, and that can throw the cortisol and melatonin a little out of whack. Okay, so this is just pictures, because I like pictures, emphasizing those points. So that environmental stimulation of light. I'm going to give you the biggest secret in nutrition. It's the law of thermodynamics, right? It's as reliable as gravity. Okay, nobody laughed. All right, so. Gosh, dang it, the
I'm
material
like,
today.
gravity's pretty reliable. This is your question.
It's just based on
'Cause I fell
physics,
down,
right?
and that was gravity.
I feel like every nutrition expert that makes way more money than me always posts like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter your diet, it just matters that you're reducing your calories. It's like, okay, I get it. But at the end of the day, that's not like the easiest thing to do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like saying gravity exists. All right, that's basically what they say. I don't know, but the whole concept is that you have calories burned in the body and you have calories consumed, right? Via food, hopefully I guess food. And then, if you burn more than you consume, you lose weight. If you burn the same as you consume, you keep the weight you're at. If you burn less than you consume, you gain weight. Simple as that. Now you can go home. You know everything about
All right,
nutrition.
thank you.
Bye.
Okay? This means obviously you can out-train a bad diet. You can eat whatever you want as long as you pump out the exercise equivalent, right? I mean, it's clear right there. I can eat the Maggie, okay? Just gotta walk 62 minutes or run 33 minutes. All right. Obviously, this is not very good advice. I don't think, but yeah. So yeah, gravity exists, yes, but what about the extent? Why? You know, why does gravity exist? Why is it that we eat less calories, more calories? But the big picture is things just don't work out like that, right? Everyone's different. There's genetic predispositions to all kinds of things. Type 1 diabetic, right? Can't produce insulin. They can't if you give them a diet that you give someone who doesn't have type 1 diabetes, they might die. Right? I mean, calories in, calories out does not explain that, does it? There's food sensitivities, there's individual preferences, there's hormonal signaling from food. When we eat food, our body responds to the food. Different types of food, different responses. The calories do not explain that. Anyway, so it's true, but it's not the most practical way of looking at things. And these links, we can always provide them to you, but Precision Nutrition has some great content on this. Calorie counting, I'm not an advocate of calorie counting. I feel like it's a lot of work. It's not to say that it doesn't work. It works for some people, but it's not the first thing I advocate for in nutrition. And when you look at the details of calorie counting, if you look at different foods, if you have 3 carrots from 3 different farms, they're each going to have a different calorie content. It could be a pretty big, significant difference in calorie content, and that's for every food. Okay. We don't absorb all the calories we consume. And the absorption of those calories are dependent on how they're prepared and given. Okay? If you cook food, you get more calories and nutrients out of the food than if you don't cook food, for example. Okay? And typically, like calorie, that stuff can be measured out, things like that. But at the same time, when you combine foods together, you have different properties, right? You have slower absorption. I'll have an example later on. When you combine glucose and fructose into a drink, okay, and you give that to an athlete after they recover, they restore their glycogen faster and replenish more than if you gave either one alone. Okay, kind of a weird situation, right? But a lot of times calories aren't going to explain it, right? Individual absorption differences, all right? We know that gut bacteria affect the digestion of food and the absorption of nutrients, right? Different kinds of flora. And there are millions of those, and people still don't understand all of that. So at the end of the day, all those kinds of variables can lead to significant fluctuations. But I do see some practical applications. One being weight-based sports, weigh-ins, large amounts of time on your hand, ongoing metric measurements of activity level. You have a very nice watch that tells you your activity level so you can make adjustments to your calories. Acquiring a proper calorie baseline, I don't think people do this. You need to actually take everything you eat normally every day for at least a week, count up all the calories, divide by 7, and get your daily average. Okay, if you're going to do anything like that. And then obviously, if you're making lots of money, and diet helps that, then that's probably a good incentive to do that. But yeah, my approach is different. I feel like calorie counting, and there's also risks with calorie counting. Recommending people with eating disorders, people with certain mental health conditions, can be pretty daunting on them. And I don't generally recommend it as a point blank generalized recommendation. Okay, so nutrition history. We're gonna change the topic. The history of nutrition. Okay, this is how people have eaten through time, human existence. Okay, we have like a context to this, right? So if human history were a 1,000-page book, all the white pages were hunter-gathering. All right, just keep that in mind. Okay, you're a human, you know what I'm talking about. All right. Then you have early agriculture, that's the green pages, and then you have blue, where it's like kind of like people started writing books. Okay? And then like famous people at the end. Okay. We started cooking food. Scientists use carbon dating. Anyone ever read Guns, Germs, and Steel? Jared Diamond?
Yep.
Carbon dating. I mean, we can tell when certain things happen in chronological time using the technology we have at hand in science. And when people started cooking food, the brain got bigger.
Yes.
Yes. Right.
Not for everyone, but
Oh.
Interesting, right? Okay. When the adaptation of agriculture happened, we didn't have recorded history, right? As shown on that graph. And there are people that are basically living in the world still today who still don't have books, and they still live like they did in those time periods, almost, or considerably. And I have some pictures here. So Stefan Lindenberg, he passed away. He's a famous paleo physician. He discovered the Katavan people in Guinea. And he realized that these people who ate predominantly starches, coconut, tiger nuts, and some fish had almost zero metabolic disease. And up until living into their 70s, 80s, he said. So he started publishing a lot of work on that, and that was, he's one of the founders of paleo diet, right? Lauren Corday. Then we have the Messians, if I pronounced that correctly, but oddly enough, they perplex the world because they eat a lot of red meat and they don't have any heart disease or metabolic disease. How could they? This is incredible. They obviously are aliens. No. Then we have the Inuits. Okay, I just wrote Alaska, but basically Inuits is like a generalized term for anyone in the north kind of Arctic tundra. And they eat predominantly seals. Okay. They have an interesting way of preparing seals using like fermentation processes. Seals are high in iron, like ridiculously high in iron. They have to prepare the seals to take the iron out. Seals and blubber, that's what they eat. Okay, predominantly. And then we have Aboriginals from Australia who eat Australian food.
Kangaroos.
Come on, kangaroos, wallabies. Even though these are agriculturalists, they still eat animal products. And there are tribes that, like the Bantu, that are claimed to be vegetarian, but if you look into it, they're not. I mean, it's a generalized term. There's lots of tribes, and they're not all vegetarian per se, but they might have the predominant amount of food that these vegetables that they grow. Okay. Alright, but the Italians are interesting because the food they eat, they don't really like farm all of it. Okay, it's like kind of where they are in New Guinea. It's just heaven.
On
right?
the tree.
It just falls from the trees, right? Don't have to do anything. I just go outside, walk in the woods, get my meal. All right, then we have the Paleolithic food pyramids, which are probably the funniest thing on earth because if I was living back in those times, I would love to find where to get an olive oil bottle. It's very difficult to do, I'm sure, but there must have been some secret. Obviously, this is Paleolithic food pyramid right here, naked and afraid. Okay, we're out in the woods. You do not care about macros. You do not care about micronutrients. Just care about living another day, right? So, yeah, I mean, the Paleolithic diet is very popular in CrossFit. That's why we're talking about it. But what I want you to see is that it really had to do with more so where people were, what foods they ate, right? Not like you choose to be an Inuit and then you choose to eat seals. Okay? But that's what's around, right?
You didn't make it to adulthood if you didn't see
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you ate what was around, and then if you read, guns, shears, and steel, if you're able to form a tribe that didn't have conflict and was able to negotiate and farm and gather, and then eventually you figured things out and were able to establish agriculture, and that's kind of the history of it. And it's thought to be like before that agricultural time period, probably you're eating meat most of the time, right? Humans are like the ultimate alpha predator. Took out the saber-toothed tiger, took out the woolly mammoth. I mean, they're just trying to eat, right? They're just trying to survive. And that's also debatable. I don't mean to state that as fact, but you look at these cultures that are in this situation, and a lot of them don't have the same disease. But they also have other lifestyle factors, like you're outside all the time, active, sleep, not exposed to technology. So what can we do? I mean, we're not them. We don't live in the woods.
Some of us.
Some of us, yeah. We're in a different situation. Our environment's different. So the way that I like to approach nutrition is to look at the physiological basis. Okay, and this is debatable in and of itself. Okay, I think there's a lot to physiology. There's a lot of debate within physiology with the demands of cells and cell systems and tissue systems are, but that's how I look at it. Okay, this is the digestive system. This is how we eat food, right? We put it in our mouth, we maybe chew it up. That's the first part of digestion, and we swallow it, it goes in your stomach, it gets in the acid bath, and then some things are absorbed, some things go to our intestines, with more absorption, and everyone's the liver, and gallbladder, and pancreas that are all aiding in filtration, absorption of nutrients, and shuttling of nutrients, and all those kinds of things. And everyone's digestive system is different. I mean, we have the same structures, but if one person eats a certain diet and another person eats another diet, we take a sample of their microbiota, they're probably going to be different. All right? They're going to have different things helping in digesting. One person might have a bigger stomach, another person might have a smaller stomach, bigger liver, smaller liver, genetic predisposition to something. Who knows? There's a lot of differences between people. Genetics, activity and lifestyle, age, okay, as we age, metabolic demands are different. We'll talk about that, but things operate differently when we get older. Then we've got macros and micros. Macronutrients are big categorizations of food into protein, carbohydrate, fat, and I consider alcohol its own macronutrient because it's very unique. It's not a carbohydrate. And then we have micronutrients. Okay, and the important part about the micronutrients is that, macro and micro, is that they're essential and non-essential. And if you're going to take something away, this is an important point. Essential means you have to get it from your diet. Your body does not make it innately. Okay, it has to be derived from an outside source. And then unessential, the body can produce it. It's not as vital to acquire. And so when we look at food, we can look at food through the eye of nutrient density. Nutrient density. How many nutrients are contained in the food thing that we're going to eat? How many of them are essential? How many of them are unessential? What are the quantities? And I think this was something that really changed my life. Matt Lalonde. You take away a presentation to watch, it's probably this one. His presentation at the Ancestral Health Symposium in 2012 on nutrient density. And listed are all the essential nutrients. I'm going to quiz you on that later. You have to pay double if you don't memorize them. And he looked at quantifying nutrient density in foods. And this has been attempted prior to him, which was the motivation because, well, he did exclude some things. He excluded sodium, because then super salty foods got preference. So highly processed super salty foods. Also fiber. So otherwise I would prefer basically all vegetables. There's a couple other things. It's interesting to listen to. I don't want to take too much away. But what what really motivated this was the original nutrient density index that Whole Foods adopted at the time, the aggregated nutrient density index of the Andy. You can see the most nutrient dense food in the world is kale, followed by collards, bok choy, and spring. Wait, just lists a bunch of vegetables, and then obviously the least nutrient dense foods are cola, fries, olive oil. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then what do we have? Oh, we have ground beef, milk, cheese. Oh man, that scores like 20. Kale's 1,000. And this is kind of why Matt Lalonde is a organic chemist. This is kind of why he decided to look into how they scored the Andes system. And lo and behold, the Andes system was invented by a bunch of vegetarians who, when calculating their nutrient density score, decided that, well, they didn't have to include a bunch of essential nutrients. Well, that's nice. And also, they had to include and actually favor carotenes and glucosinolates and all these kind of weird things that aren't essential nutrients. Okay. Lauren Cordain attempted to do a nutrient density of different types of foods, but did not include all the nutrients, and that was the other kind of motivation for Matt Lalonde to do this, is that Lauren Cordain showed that basically the paleo foods had higher nutrient density than grains. And Matt Lalonde wanted to expand further on that. And what he found was that meats and animal products had the highest nutrient density. So we're going to talk about protein next. And protein is composed of amino acids. That's just the building blocks of everything that is in your body. It's made of amino acid sequencing to make different proteins and cells. They can be arranged in all kinds of sequences. And then we have essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. So our body can harbor non-essential amino acids, but we have to consume essential amino acids. And there are some that are conditionally essential. Basically, if we're in a period of illness or stress, we should be probably consuming them versus the body has ability to make them. And it turns out most of the amino acids in muscle tissue are essential amino acids. Okay. Specifically, the branched chain amino acids are the highest content of muscle tissue. So we have leucine, isoleucine, valine. And so when we look at protein, we think of, or we determine complete proteins as proteins that contain all the amino acids. And there are various tables that we can look at. The digestible indispensable amino acid score is an interesting one. It looks at essential amino acids, and it looks at how digestible food is, how much of the amino acids we actually get. This is an important thing to consider, is that you go online, you go on the internet. I remember there was a really funny photo that said, choose the broccoli over the steak, and it said good source of protein under the broccoli. Apparently you could get as much protein out of, 2 cups of broccoli, whatever. It was ridiculous. It was really bad. It was completely untrue. But of course, someone would come up to me and be like, "Oh, you like nutrition? Eat broccoli instead of steak." You know? And realistically, first, I mean, the amino acid content of broccoli is not complete. Right? It doesn't have all the acids that steak does. Turns out, if you eat animal muscle meat, the amino acid profile is very similar to skeletal muscle of the human body, so you get more of the amino acids to build skeletal muscle. But it's also, steak is highly digestible. You get 90+% of the amino acids contained in the steak that you eat, whereas broccoli has lots of different things like fibers, different kinds of nutrients that change the absorption of foods, mainly lowering the absorption of nutrients. And so not only do you not get all the amino acids, if you look at some of those things at the bottom, you're getting 40 to 50% of whatever the actual content of the food is with a lot of vegetable things or plant matter. Okay, and that's an important thing to consider. Just another infograph illustrating that point. Okay, as you go down the ladder, milk, fully absorbed, whey protein, fully absorbed, beef, pretty much fully absorbed, right? But as you get to more plant products, grains, you don't absorb it all. So if you have that loaf of whole wheat bread and it says 6 grams of protein, 2 slices, right? Whole grains, less than 50% protein absorption.
Is that why broccoli makes you fart and steak doesn't?
Possibly. But what are you going to do? You're not getting 6 grams of protein. You're getting less than 3. Okay. So something that's just a take-home point. Okay, so protein digestibility, corrected amino acid score was the other kind of chart that looked at digestibility differences between foods. And that's just an example. I mean, the charts that you see are huge. There's other considerations, immunogenic and allergenic considerations. Okay, you have celiac disease. You should totally go by the FDA food pyramid for your protein needs. Well, obviously, someone with celiac can't have grains, they can't have gluten, they can't have all kinds of things. They shouldn't be getting their protein from those sources because they could die, okay? Sustainability, that's the most debated thing ever, and I'm not going to go into it. Food palatability reward. What tastes better to you, okay? Yeah, I don't eat vegetarian, but I know a lot of people who do, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying, what do you like to eat? What makes you happy? That's something to consider. Your protein source. And then there's just genetic differences, individual beliefs surrounding food choice. All right. Then we have fats. Okay, fat is flavor. Essential fats, omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-3 is the alpha-linoleic acid. Is the one found in plants, and that's kind of a thing that I find people buy ALA-based omega-3s. They think they're getting the omega-3s they need, but ALA does not break down in the body, and eicosapentaenoic acid and
That one.
hexanoic acid, EPA and DHA. That's the actual omega-3 content that you're looking for, and that's primarily found in animal foods. Fatty fish is probably the most extensive source of it. Omega-6, linoleic acid, found in a lot of oils, oil, things like that. And so this was fun. I mean, I was trying to find pictures of different types of fats, and of course, all of them were good fat, bad fat pictures, and I just think that's kind of ironic, but you have monounsaturated fats, all right, and this is just, the type of fats are like how they're structured, and how they're structured affects how your body responds to them. And stuff like an avocado oil, olive oil, nuts, nut butters. Then we have polyunsaturated fats, vegetable oil, sunflower seeds, omega-3s, omega-6s, or, like you said, fish and nuts. Saturated fats in a lot of animal products. And trans fats, baked goods, and things like that. Big trans fats are illegal now, but funny. Saturated fats, excess intake may increase cholesterol levels. I really want to get to this. Trans fats increases cholesterol and CVD risk, cardiovascular disease risk. Poly and monounsaturated fats decrease cholesterol and CVD risk. Those are some bold generalizations to make, but I think this is interesting. This is part of the motivation for me to go down this path of CrossFit and being a personal trainer was my experience with statins, okay, and cholesterol. I remember in my career, there's a point where, gosh, I listened to hours and hours of debate why everyone should be on statins, and we should change the cholesterol guidelines. Healthy cholesterol is 200 to 20, and we had to lower it 20 points because 20 million people are being starved of statins in the world. It was a hot debate. It was
Money
really,
had nothing to do with it.
Big pharma had nothing to do with it.
okay. Yeah, there was no lobby money involved or anything. It was pure science. Its finest. And I'm very glad that science, I think, won on this one in terms of the amount of publications that are coming out showing that, there's not, and this isn't medical advice, right, but there's not a whole lot of good evidence to look at cholesterol and lipids as a cause of cardiovascular disease or as a signal of cardiovascular disease. The best way to figure out if someone is developing cardiovascular disease is more precise screenings, perhaps, actually looking at the arteries, seeing if they're calcifying. There's been several studies that show that there's a very poor correlation between cholesterol levels and calcification of arteries and cardiovascular disease. And none of them were pharmaceutically funded, which is kind of ironic, but the big picture is that, people would come in that have cardiovascular disease, they look at their lipids, it's like, oh, well, every time it rains, someone has an umbrella. Umbrellas obviously cause rain. Scenario, okay. But if you see here, this was a study, I think this was 80,000 people, cholesterol levels. This is a hazard ratio, so when that line touches the dotted line, it means that they have the lowest risk of mortality. They were looking at cardiovascular disease mortality, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and mortality, A, B, C. Interestingly enough, the cholesterol levels with the lowest risks need statins, so these people are obviously deprived of statins. So right away they gave them all statins because they're at risk of these diseases. Of course not. They found that total cholesterol was actually in the range of 200 to 260, protective against these things. Okay? So Kaplan-Meier, it's just a statistical photo. And usually if you want to see like a huge difference, these lines wouldn't be so close together. Okay, having them that close, a very small percentage of deviation. Okay. It's not a lot of significance there. Okay, if I was going to see something where you're going to tell me that my cholesterol is 200 and I'm going to die, I would expect there to be a line that's really far away from all the other lines, but obviously that's not the case. That's also personal opinion, but one of the conclusions of those studies, I think one of the studies had 1.2 million people power it, and they did have high cholesterol levels in the blood. A main cause of CVD is impossible because people with low levels become just as atherosclerotic as people with high levels, and their risk of suffering from CVD is the same or higher. Okay, and I think that's something that's probably not going to be popular for a little while. But yeah, so there's just more studies. There's actually a considerable amount of studies at this point. So carbohydrates. So in the conclusion of that is like bad fats. I mean, I don't consider fats bad in general. I mean, trans fats, yes, they're synthetic, but fats have their own purpose. Cholesterol is a building block to hormones and different things in the body. All right, so carbohydrates essentiality. Do you need carbs? You should ask a lion if he needs carbs. Yeah, carbs are like the most controversial thing in nutrition. As their essentiality is fiber essential, are carbohydrates essential? Do you have to eat plants? There are different cultures around the world that don't eat any vegetables. So yeah, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but something. Okay, and there are different types of carbohydrates. You have sugars, simple carbohydrates, things like fruits. Milk has simple sugars in it, sugar, salt. Then you have starches. Those are more complex carbohydrates that contain a lot of energy. Okay, starches tend to have a lot more glycogen or carbohydrate content. And then you have fibrous, complex carbohydrates that are like your vegetables, fruit vegetables, celery, carrots, all that kind of stuff. The thing to take away about carbohydrates is that carbohydrates contain sugars, right? And depending on the type and how much you eat, that's going to have an effect on your body. Okay. If it has a lot of sugar and not a lot of fiber, you tend to get a lot of sugar all at once, right? And that's what we call like a glycemic load. So each food has a glycemic index. It's basically the sugar content of the food itself, but that's not the whole picture because foods also have other things in them like fibers and things that affect the digestibility of the food and weight. So like watermelon has a glycemic index of 72. It's considered high, but if you look at the glycemic load of watermelon, it's low because it's mostly water and fiber, and so that sugar is spread out a little more. And then so I'm going to talk about insulin because this has come to be my own like passion and how I approach nutrition is based on insulin response. And so insulin is a hormone that tells us to burn sugar and store fat. Okay, it's a storage hormone, it's a growth hormone. In some ways, grows muscle, grows fat cells, burn sugar. And glycemic load of foods affects insulin release. Okay, so that glycemic load, you eat food, the sugar that comes out, all right, it's in your stomach. Your pancreas is right there. Pancreas produces some insulin. That insulin helps you digest or absorb the glucose you're consuming from the meal. And when you look at foods on this chart, just foods kind of on the left don't release a whole lot of insulin, and foods on the right use more insulin, so you can see way up at the top jelly beans,
Mm.
right? You can see way at the bottom, you got bacon. Okay, obviously you should eat more bacon. All right, so